It's time for the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Good morning, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show right here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm, of course, your host, Brian Beatty. We've got a lot to discuss today. And, well, folks, it's official. Jerome Powell and the Fed have decided to keep interest rates locked in place again. And no, they didn't forget where the down button is. They're just not pushing it, at least yet. And that decision, it's got ripple effects throughout the housing market, especially if you're thinking of buying, selling, refinancing, or just sitting tight in your home because you locked in a nice, 2.75% interest rate a few years ago. So today, I want to unpack what this means, short-term, long-term, how it impacts the way people think and behave in real estate, and how that behavior might, hurt more than it helps. So let's talk a little bit first about the Fed's kind of wait and see plan. And so last week, Powell said, we're holding steady. The translation, of course, is that mortgage rates aren't likely to drop meaningfully anytime soon. Inflation's still sticky. Job numbers are solid. And the Fed's just playing the slow game, right? Trump isn't happy about it. Anyone trying to buy their first home isn't happy about it. People that want to sell and then buy aren't happy about it. And that's one of the reasons why Trump is backing, I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but Trump is backing the No Tax on Home Sales Act, which was introduced by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a Republican out of Georgia. And essentially what it would do is it would eliminate the capital gains tax on the sale of your primary residence. And so according to the National Association of Realtors, about 1 in 3 homeowners actually have more equity than the tax-exempt limits currently provide for, that are currently in place. It's $250,000 if you're filing singly. If you're filing jointly, it's up to $500,000 in no capital gains tax. And so it would certainly, look, that would unlock a lot of equity for folks. That would allow them to kind of get in the game, but it's still too early to sell. My guess is that it's just going to result in the limit for that exemption on capital gains being increased, which would still be a win, right? That would be a good thing. You'd have a lot of folks that didn't have to, pay the man to sell their home. And we have a lot of folks, especially baby boomers, a lot of folks that listen to this show that have more equity than the current capital gains tax exemption of $500,000 if you're filing jointly, or if you're a single filer, $250,000 more that would allow. And so here's, I think, what I would want you to consider. Has waiting for the perfect rate ever actually gotten you a better result? Or really has it just delayed your plans? I mean, that's something I think folks need to kind of ask themselves. It's something that I ask of my clients because let's face it, inaction in real estate usually means one thing: missed opportunity. All right. And so remember, the Fed rate, by the way, that is not your mortgage rate. It does influence investor behavior, which means the 30-year fixed rate, for now, at least, are staying put. They're kind of hovering in the high 6s, the low 7s, depends on what type of loan product you get. And then, of course, your down payment, your credit score, your debt to income ratio, the actual lender you choose. All of those things matter when it comes to how much are you going to pay every month to own a home. It's not an exciting interest rate, but it's certainly not, a time to, pop the champagne. So let's look at this from kind of like a short-term perspective, right? So despite the Fed's decision, the unemployment numbers that came out Friday this week actually looked really good as it relates to the likelihood of rates dropping. And so according to my network of just very well-informed lenders, if we can keep CPI, the Consumer Price Index, at 0.2 or less next week, we could see some relief in lower interest rates. Maybe, right? But let's talk buyers first. I get it. You're thinking, why buy now when rates could go down soon, right? The counter to that is that if rates drop, what do you think is going to happen to demand? And when demand spikes, what happens to prices? Spoiler alert, they usually go up. And even with the issues that we've faced in this market with regard to affordability, we still don't have relief in terms of a balanced supply in relation to demand. Now, don't get me wrong, that trend is moving toward a normal market. Things are taking longer to sell. We do have more properties on the market than we did this time last year. That rate at which new properties are getting on the market and sitting on the market is increasing, which is why you're seeing more price reductions, which is why you're seeing sellers be more open-minded and negotiable and willing to make a deal, right? So if you're trying to save on interest, there are plenty of ways of doing that. You can literally negotiate with the seller and you can get them to buy down your interest rate, either permanently or temporarily. But I think the question is, are you trying to save on interest or are you just afraid of making the wrong move, right? So let's flip the coin, right? Homeowners, you're sitting pretty right now. You're probably got a sub 4% mortgage and you're saying, why would I trade up to a 7% rate, which is a totally fair question, right? And that's part of what I don't think, our wonderful government anticipated when they artificially lowered rates down to next to nothing, right? Was this lock-in effect, this golden handcuffed effect that we've been talking about at this point for years, right? So that mentality of, well, why would I trade up in payment is a totally fair question, but does that home that you're currently in fit your lifestyle, or does the home itself need to change, right? Is staying put really worth sacrificing your quality of life for the next 5 to 10 years just because of a rate gap, right? That's the kind of question that makes people stop and think for a minute, right? Because rates will change, right? They change every day, quite frankly. But your time, that's really the one thing you can't get back. Now, for the investors that are listening, you're watching this dance like a hawk right now, right? Your cash flow is tighter. Renovation loans are more costly. The margin for error has shrunk. You have to know what you're doing, right? Because when everyone else is scared, you should be shopping, right? It's the old saying, where there's chaos, there's opportunity. And so if you look at it more from a, kind of switching gears, look at it from a long-term perspective, right? This is where the crystal ball mentality comes in, right? Powell's goal is to, I don't technically know what his goal is, but he wants to stabilize inflation and keep the labor market healthy, right? That sounds good on paper. But if this Fed stays too tight for too long, we risk an overcorrection, right? We risk a cooling of the housing market into a slow crawl. And you're already starting to see publications just go online and you'll have everybody that is essentially reporting the doom and gloom of the real estate market, that, everything is freezing over. And that's not necessarily true. But here's what's wild. We have record home equity. We have near record low inventory, and demand is just waiting to re-enter the market. It's not that it's gone. It's just on pause. So what happens when rates fall eventually, right? It's going to be like Costco on a Saturday. Everyone and their dog's going to be in there making offers, I think. But my question to you is this: do you want to move do you want to be ahead of the curve, or just kind of stuck in this like bidding war that we got used to over the past several years? Because I think if the market's tough now, wait until rates come down. We haven't basically made up for lost time with new listings entering the market. And I think we're going to be back in a position where demand gets unlocked and we start seeing properties sell faster. Now, I do think there are some bigger picture things that are happening to Charleston that are causing people to leave, or that are causing people to come and stay temporarily, try it out for a year or two, realize it's not for them, or get called back to work, or whatever the case might be. But let's just kind of zoom out for a second. People aren't necessarily stuck because of finances. That is a very real possibility for a lot of folks, especially first-time home buyers. But I think what a lot of people are stuck on are the feelings, right? The fear, the uncertainty, the analysis paralysis, right? So they're telling themselves, I'll just wait for rates to drop. But they don't know what that exactly means. How far, how soon, what happens next? What goal are you trying to accomplish? You think, while this is going on, life changes, and guess what? You still haven't made a move. And that's why I sometimes challenge folks with these questions. Is your decision about money, or is it about confidence? Because once you separate the two, your path, I think, becomes a lot more clear. And sellers, look, inventory is still relatively low. Yes, we've seen an increase in inventory. You're starting to see multiple homes for sale in a neighborhood, whereas, rewind 2-3 years ago, and there was maybe one at a time. It got really hard at that point in time, too, to determine what something was worth, because there were so few homes being sold, or they're being sold so quickly that it just seemed like everything that's going to sell the next go around is going to be more expensive, right? And so if inventory is low and good homes are still getting strong offers, but, if you wait too long thinking the market will heat up again, you might miss that sweet spot, which is why, I think there's an interesting opportunity right now, especially for those that are going to sell their home and then buy another, to price your home right, get it marketed really well, hire an agent that really understands what they're doing in this kind of market. They understand the dynamics of the market. You still can get a good deal on your house, and then you can go and you can basically beat up a seller when you go and buy a house, right? It's what we want to talk about is leverage and how we can use that leverage to our advantage. So here's the real deal in Charleston, at least. In the short term, I think rates are staying sticky. We might see some relief in the coming weeks. It's going to depend on CPI numbers next week. And then, of course, every other factor that you could think of to determine whether or not lenders are going to reduce their rate. They're going to reduce their rate if they feel confident that the actual rate's going to come down, because they're not going to just give money away, right? They need to have a spread between the interest rate they give you and then what they can sell that mortgage for on the secondary mortgage market, right? So rates are sticky. Demand is, I would say, cautious at the moment. Sellers are reluctant, and inventory is still a problem. I think in the midterm, any future rate cuts will be slow and small. I'm not seeing any silver bullets here. I'm not seeing any magic wands. And I think in the long term, for those of you who think strategically, not emotionally, those are the ones that are going to win. And so whether you're buying, selling, investing, you want your property managed, right? You want to enjoy that interest rate and benefit from rental income. We can help you with buying, selling, investing, or managing your property. So, the question is your current situation getting you where you want to go, or are you just kind of comfortable right now? And if you're comfortable right now, then enjoy that interest rate. But if you want to move, there's some ways to make this all work and have it be financially rewarding, even with interest rates where they are right now. So if that's something I can help you guys with, if you're thinking about making a move, right, and you want to talk strategically about a plan, have your questions answered, and just get some clarity on the process in this type of market, then I invite you to give me a call. You can call or text me. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or you can reach out through our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And don't forget to check us out on YouTube. We're on TikTok and all our socials. We even have a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Just search the Brian Beatty team and you'll find us. But if you've ever thought about buying a new construction home, especially without a realtor, then you need to hear what just happened on Johns Island. This is incredible stuff. A court ruling just sent a really strong message to builders who basically think that they can play fast and loose with a contract, your money, and frankly, your future home. If you've ever walked into a model home and felt like everything was just a little too easy, a little too perfect, this case might explain why it's dangerous to take all of that at face value. So here's the scoop. Eastwood Homes, which is a big builder out of Charlotte, had a clause in their standard contract that basically said this, we, the builder, can cancel your contract at any time and for any reason because we said so. Seriously, those are basically the terms. And when asked about it in court, Their general counsel literally said, quote, "I don't really care what your opinion is. It's only my opinion that matters, period." So just let that sink in for a moment, right? 9 buyers in a development called Swiggert's Landing on Johns Island had their contracts unilaterally canceled just days before closing. And some of these folks had already sold their previous homes. They had lined up moving trucks, and they were planning their lives around that closing. And then, boom, canceled. Well, the question is why, right? The builder claimed it was a paperwork error involving HOA documents. But instead of fixing it, they sent the buyers a mutual release, quote unquote, mutual release, refunded the deposits and offered them the chance. They offered them the chance to repurchase that same home later at market value. And wouldn't you know it, prices went from $530-something thousand to over $800,000. So that's what we're dealing with. And this, it's obviously happens, right? So the South Carolina Court of Appeals, they didn't buy it, right? They called Eastwood Homes' termination clause unconscionable, right? That's basically lawyer speak for so one-sided, so unfair, so stacked against the consumer that it's unenforceable. And the judges basically said a buyer has skin in the game, right? They have risk on the line and a contract that binds them. But the builder can walk away scot-free anytime, right? That's not a real contract. That's a trap. And the court made another key point. Even if the buyers were intelligent, even if they read the contract, they were not negotiating from an equal position. They were handed a take it or leave it deal, and most people took it because they didn't know any better, right? And so now here's where it gets real, right? Most home buyers believe that builders are trustworthy, right? They see the granite countertops, the smell of fresh paint, the smiling sales rep. You know, they assume that everything's going to be taken care of. But ask yourself this. If the builder has their own sales team, their own contract, because every contract for a builder is different, right? There's no state standardized new construction contract. Every builder has their own version of a contract. And they have their own attorney. So, and a lot of them own their own mortgage companies. So they get to say, hey, if you use our closing attorney and you use our, lender and, you work with our sales team or whatever, we'll pay all your closing costs. There's an incentive attached to that, right? But who's looking out for you? Would you walk into a courtroom without a lawyer? Would you negotiate a divorce without representation? I mean, that's why, why are people spending $500,000 or more on homes without someone in their corner, right? The biggest misconception I hear is that if I use a realtor, it's going to cost me more. And that is simply not true, right? Most builders have already budgeted for realtor commissions. That's part of their cost structure. But if you don't use one, guess what? You don't get a rebate. You just save the builder money. And you lost your voice in the process. So when you walk into a model home alone, here's usually what happens, right? You're handed a beautiful brochure. They're told you to, here's a waiting list or we've got limited availability. Fill out your contact information. And then when things come available, we can let you know. And then, of course, if everything goes well, according to them, then they present you with a contract full of legalese that basically you don't understand. There's no inspection language written by a third party. There's no contingency for protecting your deposit if things go sideways. And there's often no recourse if the builder delays or substitutes materials or changes the timeline, right? You're flying blind in a lot of these instances and a lot of these new construction deals. So let me ask you, do you want to find out what your rights are after something goes wrong, or would you rather have someone on your side from the beginning who's been through this type of situation dozens, hundreds of times, right? This Eastwood Homes case, I think, proves exactly what can go wrong and how little power buyers actually have, especially when they go at it alone. So, here's what I'll say. When you work with me or someone on my team, especially on a new construction purchase, you're not just getting somebody to help you unlock the front door. You're getting an expert that can review and explain the contract in plain English, and that has attorneys that can review those contracts for you, many of times at no expense. You have, of course, someone to negotiate on your behalf. Yes, even with big builders. You've got a watchdog that makes sure that the construction process is going smoothly and that you get what you contracted to get. Right? I can't tell you the number of times things go wrong in a new construction build. Don't just assume that because they have house plans and they've got contractors and they've done this before that they don't make mistakes. I've never had a home inspection on a new construction home that didn't find at least a few things wrong with the property, right? I think it's also important that you have some leverage if things go sideways, and someone who's been through, dozens of builder disputes and knows exactly how to keep you protected. I think that's better than hoping the builder just quote unquote does the right thing, right? You're not being pushy by asking for representation. I think you're being smart. But the issue that really came along as a result of COVID is that, and it's kind of always been the case, it's what I'm talking about now is procuring cause of a sale, right? Because then that's what relates to commissions and representation and so on and so forth. And in many instances, if you walk into a new construction community and you register, right, you sign something, even if it's just an attendance sheet, then and you don't name a real estate agent as the person that will be representing you in the purchase, the builder does not have to include an agent that represents you after the fact. They can deny compensation to an agent if you don't name them at the point in time you walk through that community. So for anybody that's thinking about new construction, building a home or buying a home from a builder that's advertised as quote unquote coming soon, there's plenty of them like Church Creek Landing, Waterford Commons. I mean, you need to call an agent. I'm happy to help you, of course, with this process, but I think you need to sit down with somebody. You need to understand the process. You need to understand your rights. You need to understand what can and sometimes will go wrong in new construction deals. And at the end of the day, have somebody that can bring you the truth and the strategy and the experience that keeps your real estate dreams safe from bad deals like what happened with these folks and Eastwood Homes. So if that's something that you'd like more information on, if it's something I can help you with, we've got a great list of builders that I think are fantastic to work with and plenty of incentives in these communities where the builder owns the lending company. And essentially what they're doing is they are sacrificing profit on the loan to maintain profit on the build and sale of the property, of the asset, by doing something like giving you a introductory rate of like 3.99%. Some of them have even lower interest rates. It all depends on how you structure the deal. But there are some good deals in new construction. Don't get me wrong. This isn't a blanket, harsh statement against all builders, but it is a PSA to you, the person listening that might want to buy new construction, because things can and will go wrong, and you need somebody that can fight for you, that's been through this before, that knows what to look out for, and can basically find the traps before you fall in them. So if you'd like to reach out to me to help you with that, my number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Check out our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. I want to dive into something that's, we've talked about it a little bit in the first segment, but it's something that's really just been creeping under the surface of the real estate market. And it's a growing kind of disconnect between how people feel about the market and what's actually happening. Right. And this, I'm not going to get into a bunch of stats. We're going to save that for next show when that information comes available and we can do a status check on where we are as a market right now. But of course, if at any point in time you want a home equity analysis, right, you want to figure out not only what your home is worth, what it would sell for, but how much cash you have in your house after expenses, after making mortgage payoffs, whatever the case might be, whatever's owed and attached to the real estate, how much cash do you have in your house? And then we also are always maintaining a list of off-market properties, right? That's maybe just as a quick sidebar, that's something that has done wonders for our clients and frankly for us too, is our ability to do deals that are not on the active open market. In other words, these are homes that can be purchased that are not publicly available. You can't find them. There's no internet search or site that's going to have this list of homes because there's no agreement between the agent and the seller to promote that property, right? You would need a written listing agreement to market something like that. But there are all these folks out there that are open to selling their home. They just don't want to have it on the open market. And even if there's not someone on our list right now, we have ways of basically finding people that are interested in selling their home that are not currently on the market. And so if you're thinking of maybe selling your home, buying another, or just buying or just selling, tap into our resources. We spend a lot of time and energy and resources to build this list so that we have, quite frankly, a competitive advantage over other real estate agents. And if that's something you want to tap into, then you can just call or text me and we can get in touch and see if we might be able to help. My number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. So, last month, let me put it this way. We've got consumer confidence that's ticking up, right? People are saying they feel better about the economy and the housing market, but then we look at the actual data and we see that, home sales just hit a 30-year low. Affordability is worse than it's been in almost a generation. And first-time home buyers are basically priced out of the market while investors scoop up lower-priced inventory left and right, making it even harder for them. So, again, kind of today I'm asking, is your plan based on feelings or on a strategy that actually works? So last month, the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index showed something kind of surprising, right? Which is that consumer confidence rose to the highest level in nearly 2 years as it relates to the housing market. And that all sounds great, right? And it makes headlines. It feeds the narrative that people are feeling more optimistic. But here's my question. Are we just feeling better, or are we actually in a better position to buy or sell? Because when you dig deeper, you see almost the opposite story, right? Mortgage rates still hovering in the high 6s, low 7s, home prices that haven't come down, at least in our area yet, inventory that's still low, prices that are still inflated. So what's really going on here? There's a difference between, sentiment is not equal to action, right? There's a difference between feeling ready and actually being ready, right? People feel, in my experience, a little more confident because inflation's cooling slightly. Job numbers are steady. Rates might come down. Again, it depends on what happens next week. It might come down, right? But here's the kicker. The optimism that we have in the market isn't necessarily translating into action, right? June, frankly, marked one of the worst home buying seasons in over a decade, right? Because the math still doesn't work for most people, right? The average monthly payment on a median priced home is up almost 40% compared to just 3 years ago. So again, if confidence is up, but activity is down, what's really going on in people's heads, right? Here's, I think here's where the smart money is going. Here's what they're doing. I think while most buyers are kind of hesitating right now, small-time investors, as an example, are loading up. I mean, I'm just about to complete a flip that is going to be my most profitable one ever, right? Mom and pop investors, flippers, rental buyers, they're looking aggressively at the market. They're negotiating, they're getting deals, they're locking up good deals on properties. And that's because they understand what most consumers miss, which is that when everyone else is scared, the best deals tend to show up. And they know how to run the numbers. And they're not chasing a quote-unquote perfect rate. They're chasing return on investment. Meanwhile, the average homeowner is just saying, I'm going to wait for rates to come down. Okay, well, again, and then what? You and 20 other people rush back to the market, prices spike, and you're back into a bidding war on a property. It's exactly kind of where we were from 2020 to 2022, with the exception of much lower interest rates, right? We basically went from a sentiment of, well, why not? Why not sell and buy now? Or why not buy a home now? To, well, why would I? Why would I trade in my better interest rate, right? And so, consumer sentiment, at the end of the day, it's emotion, right? It's emotional. It's an emotion, and emotion in real estate often does not bode well, right? It can be a hindrance, right? People say we're just going to wait until next year. Sellers are saying I'll list when the market heats up. Investors are saying let's strike now while demand is confusing, right? And who wins, right? So let me ask you, what's your plan based on actual market conditions or media headlines that don't apply to your specific neighborhood? Because Charleston is not New York and Mount Pleasant is not Goose Creek. And timing the market based on national news is like sailing without a compass, right? Confidence without a strategy, again, it's just a feeling. And in real estate, feelings without facts can cost you big money. And that's why when I sit down with folks, I want it to be as educational as possible. I really want them to understand what I understand about the current tone of the real estate market and how that impacts them, their plan, their home, the home they're going to buy, right? So what's the big takeaway here? It's most buyers and sellers think that they can navigate the market on their own. They think reading a few blogs or listening to a podcast is enough to get by. And I appreciate that. And I do hope that folks that listen to the show are truly more informed than your average Joe when it comes time for you to buy, sell, invest in real estate. But I think this market is eating amateurs alive. I mean, the difference between a good decision and a bad one isn't always obvious until it's too late. And so I think what the true professionals are doing and what a true professional can do for you is they can look at those local market trends, not just, national headlines or what they're being fed by their brokerage. They have the ability to analyze and interpret the market based on your situation and your goals. And they can understand when to be aggressive, when to wait. They can build a pricing or offer strategy that creates leverage. And they can fairly accurately predict what's going to happen next, not just react to what's happening now. I mean, that's what experience gets you, right? Is some foresight. And so let me ask you, if the current market suddenly shifted tomorrow, would your current plan still work, right? Are you just crossing your fingers and hoping that it does? It's a big difference between guessing and knowing, right? And that's why I'm here to help, whether it's just to educate you on the show or to earn your business as a real estate agent. So if you've been sitting on the sidelines and kind of waiting for that quote unquote right time to buy or sell a home, I think now's the time to kind of shift your thinking a little bit, right? And to look for opportunity based on a real plan. So if you want to sit down and talk strategy, no fluff, no pressure, no sales pitch, just a real conversation about your goals, your timing, the market, and how it's going to all work together or not, then, again, I invite you to give me a call, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. You can visit our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. I want to end this with something that's maybe a little spicy, a little spicier than usual. But I want to talk about, at least from my perspective, the top 5 mistakes that even smart, educated, financially responsible people make when they hire the wrong real estate agent. And I'm not talking about, first-time home buyers or people who just don't, frankly, know any better. But I'm talking about people who are sharp, successful, that have been through transactions before and still somehow end up with an agent equivalent of like a wet paper towel, right? And you think maybe because somebody's, nice or they did a good job for your cousin when she bought her first condo that you're covered, right? You're all good. But that decision, frankly, could cost you thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars and months of your time that you just won't get back. So, I think the first mistake that I see a lot of people make is they hire a friend instead of a professional. And look, I get it. This is something that we have conversations about probably every day as our sales team is having conversations, because we get a lot of leads every month, and we've got a big old database of folks that we communicate with. And so, look, I get it. Your friend just got licensed. You want to help him out. You trust him. But would you rather hire your friend, as an example, who just got their CPA and they're going to help you do your taxes on a multi-million-dollar business deal? Probably not, right? You're going to go to a professional that really understands that because you want to save as much money as possible. So why are people, I guess, handing over keys to their biggest financial investment to someone who's brand new or part-time and just, it's a hobby for them almost, right? It's a side gig. Your home is not a hobby, and the agent that you hire shouldn't be either, right? You need to really interview the person that you're going to hire and take it seriously. I mean, let's be honest. There are some folks that have kind of a nonchalant attitude about this process, and I think a lot of them think that it's because all agents are the same, right? And so that kind of leads me to mistake number 2, is that they fell for the flash, not the facts. Some agents have gotten really good at delivering a nice, flashy, crisp listing presentation in order to earn your business. But guess what? Listing presentations don't sell homes. Strategy does. And I've seen agents bring in a magazine-style brochure. I've seen people that, I was an international real estate coach for years. I was coaching people from New York to LA, some in Canada, all over the place. Folks that ran big businesses that needed to create systems in their business and run their business like an actual business instead of just a collection of people that want to sell as many homes as possible, right? And so what I brought to the table was business acumen, structure, people, product, and process, right? The 3 Ps. And so I've seen agents bring in, magazine-style brochures, drone video to get the listing, reduce their commission, do whatever they can to make the seller feel good about hiring them without any mention to something as important as like a pricing strategy or buyer psychology or how they plan to actually create demand. And then on top of that, how do they actually find the people that are going to inevitably be interested in your home, right? Do they actually have a way of identifying potential buyers for your home, or is it more of just the same old that agents have done for decades? Set it and forget it. Put it online and wait for people to show up, right? So are you hiring somebody because the market, they market themselves really well, or because they know how to market your home really well? That goes back to the whole, do you hire a neighborhood expert or a marketing expert, right? I could know everything there is to know about my neighborhood, but if I don't have a way of broadcasting that information and I don't have a system in place for intelligently marketing all the great things I know about that home and how that can then benefit the buyer, much less even find the buyer, then, I've got a billboard in the middle of nowhere, right? That's why I think marketing experts are the people that you need to hire. And so sellers, you don't need pretty, you need powerful, right? You need an agent that really understands the market and has confidence in it. I think the third mistake is that people didn't know their agent was so afraid to negotiate, right? This one's kind of a silent killer. Some agents are really great at smiling and nodding, but when it comes time to protect your money, they fold faster than a lawn chair, right? So has your agent ever pushed back on a low ball offer? Have they ever created leverage in a multiple offer situation? Have they ever made a buyer come up when they didn't want to and you're negotiating a deal? Negotiation is a skill. And if your agent can't confidently advocate for you or for themselves for that matter, then guess who's winning the deal? It's probably not you, right? Again, we talked about this fourth mistake is just assuming that all agents are the same, right? That's the biggest myth in real estate, is that all agents basically do the same thing. And if that were true, how do you explain the gap between average agents and top performers? Let's give you a stat, right? The average agent in Charleston sells 6 to 8 homes a year, right? We've sold 1,500. Why? Because there's a difference in how we market, price, present, and sell our properties, right? So you need to think about the person that you're hiring and ultimately the impact they're going to have on your transaction and whether you can confidently say that they are the best person to get you the most money for your home possible. And in order for that to happen, you need to avoid the biggest mistake, which is mistake number 5, which is you don't ask hard questions, right? Here's the truth. If your agent can't answer basic questions like what's your average list to sales price ratio, or how do you handle bidding wars or appraisal gaps, or what's your backup plan if the home doesn't sell in 30 days, or how are you going to find buyers for my home specifically, then you don't have a strategy. You have a seat filler, and so you need to ask yourself, are you being sold or are you being guided, right? One leads to regret, one leads to results, right? So if you want to make sure you never end up in real estate agent regret, then here's what I would do. I would ask for the data, right? Not just the testimonials, but get their track record, right? Anytime I go on an appointment, even before I meet with those folks, I send them a list of everything I've sold. And it's a big, it's like size 8 font, double-sided, 40 pages of everything we've sold. That's a pretty thick resume, and it's our track record, and it's got all kinds of great stats on there. But I think you also need to challenge them, right? Make them earn your business with a plan, not just a pitch. I think you also need to trust your gut, right? If something feels off, it probably is, or at least ask more questions and get clarity. And always remember that you're the boss, right? You don't have to settle for nice. You need somebody who knows how to protect your money and negotiate like your future depends on it, because in many ways it does. So if you're thinking of selling your home, give me a call, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. And we've got some great incentives right now for folks that are thinking of selling and or buying or both. So we'd love to talk with you more about what we're bringing to the table to help you make this more of a financially rewarding transaction. So if you'd like more information on that, again, 843-800-0065 or listingsincharleston.com. You guys enjoy your weekend, and thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.